So try to make the water muddy, try to get him into messy situations. Robert, do you agree that that is Fedosiev's best chance here? Try to get as much chaos in?
Well, I think for Fedoseev, he is a combative player by nature, but it can backfire. And look at this. He plays the Petrov defense from the black side, which I think is a good choice against Magnus, because Magnus Carlsen is the better player. That's clear. But what Fedoseev, where he can backfire, is just like against Alireza Firouzja. In that fourth game, he was lost, right? He was down a couple pawns, but in the time scramble is where he was able to shine. So I think that Fedoseev, he needs to keep the games going. Magnus is a brilliant speed chess player. He's won the speed chess championship. He made it to the finals of the bullet chess championship, but that's where he has the most opportunity to go wrong, late stage of the game when you don't have enough time. So I think that Fedoseev, he chose a wise opening in game one.
Times have changed. When I was young, okay, Magnus there, a bit distracted, maybe closing the curtains. But when I was young, this opening, if anyone played this way against the Petrov, trying to trade off queens early, we would have laughed them out of chess. We would have told them, this isn't the game for you. You know, you're too timid. Nobody likes players who play for a draw. But Magnus plays this type of position for a win. It's so symmetrical, but white has 2 extra tempi for now, and it's all about placing the pieces on their best squares. Yes, the queens have gone. I guess Magnus is simply arguing that there's enough forces, there's enough of his army left to cause some problems later. He's beaten the likes of Jan Nepomniachtchi before in this type of position, but I'm still skeptical. Magnus, why? Why not entertain us? We want to see more checkmates. But Fedoseev, he's going to emerge unscathed from the opening, and the battle's really going to be postponed towards the endgame now. Robert, surprised at all? Are you as scathing as me? Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh about this opening choice.
I was surprised, but I think that it's Fedoseev playing something that he doesn't always trot out. So I think that Magnus Carlsen, as you said, he likes getting positions where there isn't so much risk. He can outplay his opponent. And we saw just before the latest move that the draw rate was through the roof. So, Tanya, when the history shows that black can hold on quite frequently, I think players, they think, let's go for that. But against Magnus Carlsen, it's a totally different game.
Absolutely agree with you. This is a queenless middle game. Well, there is an obvious but a big threat on the board immediately by Magnus. That knight jumping in, knight takes c7. So it's something that you need to take care of immediately. He falls back with the bishop. And yes, the queens are off the board, but the gloves are still on, because I think the players want to still fight it out. Magnus, we've seen him do crazy things in the end game. So I'm still expecting this to be a fight. He's fighting for more space right now. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a slow one, but we've got a game on our hands. It's far from over when you're playing against Magnus. I think it only gets scarier when the queens are off.
I'm inclined to agree. I've suffered so many times at the hands of Magnus. I think we all have at this point. Once the queens are off, he knows better than anyone. He just has this feel of where the pieces belong. He spins his web, and sooner or later, it does get tactical, it does sharpen up, and then he takes his chances. I've got to say, he's handled this really well. No weaknesses at all in the black camp. Black's king is castled. The rook will slide across to e8. It's just about how white develops the pieces. The white king needs to choose a side. Maybe it'll sit in the center, but I don't see why black should ever be worse. You kick back the white knight, you develop your own pieces. This should be level with equal play. It's just about whether Magnus can exert that magic a bit later. Without meaning to be too pessimistic about this game, should we check out the opening, the early stages of the other battle, the clash of the underdogs? Jose Martinez he worked this endgame magic we've been talking about, this queenless middle game, we'll call it. And here, I've got to say, first glance, I like white, purely because of this knight that he's just installed on the c6 square. But black has reasons to be optimistic too, Robert.
Yeah, this is a position where it resembles the other game in that white has the pair of bishops, but the queens are off the board, and of note is this doubled A-pawns for white. But that's not actually a bad thing at this stage of the game. With so many pieces remaining on the board, white can go after some of black's targets, and black is not creating a pass pawn because the A2 pawn still covers the pawn on the B file. This is maybe a deep concept for some, but the point is that it's not like some other double pawns, as we saw in Jan Nepomniachtchi versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave earlier. So this last move from Fedoseev, great decision. He's trying to bring a knight to E5 or to C5, and that A4 pawn is the target. A knight in the center usually is a good place to put it. And he wants to activate his pieces, including the bishop on D8, which does have a new diagonal to work with without the knight in its path. So Tanya, as we look at this position, I think all of us were inclined to believe that white is better, but I feel like there's some natural plans for black.
Agreed. And the point that you just made, without bishop on d8 stepping up to f6, taking control of the the long diagonal a1 to h8 once white's bishop comes to d4, it looks like Magnus's bishop pair advantage is going to be neutralized really soon. Either there'll be a knight trade from c5 or the bishop trade from f6, and the pawn's structural weaknesses in Magnus's camp more than enough compensate for Fedoseev, the lack of the bishop. I love that knight on c6. But I'm trying to understand, why is our Evalbar favoring white so much? Bishop d4, there seems to be bishop f6. If not, the knight is jumping forward into the game. What's going on here? Whoa. That's going on here. That's what's going on here.
Oh, we didn't expect that. And again, the blue arrow indicating that black's only move, or at least by far the best move, is rook takes bishop. That would not have been on my radar, Robert. An exchange sacrifice pretty much demanded by Fedoseev right now. This is a pawn sacrifice, and I just wanted to point out, let's jump in. If this pawn is captured, if you just whip this pawn off the board, what could be more natural? Go up material. Suddenly a new diagonal for white's uncontested light squared bishop, and tricks, tactics in the air. Black has two loose pieces on this diagonal, and something might well just drop off. So don't be too greedy. I think likewise, if you capture this pawn with the knight, there are problems tactically. Bishop takes, and suddenly watch out for your back rank. You can trade off a set of rooks, but now you have to be careful. If pawn takes, suddenly a deadly check, and your bishop will simply drop off next move. So Magnus initiating the tactics. Let's just show what he... Okay, he's played pawn takes pawn. He needed to play rook takes bishop and basically admit that, okay, if rook takes, there are tricks in black's favor this time with a nice pin. But pawn takes pawn, Robert, do you think this is going to backfire? Fedoseev playing that move instantly.
And look at Magnus's reply, what you were calling for, David. Bishop to b5. There are too many tactics now. And so what Magnus did is he gave away a pawn to free up diagonals for his bishops. And I say bishops plural, because now that knight on d7, if it continues to move, say, to e5, well, oh, and he does it a move too late, does Fedoseev. The right idea, wrong move order. I still feel like he has chances to survive this game. Let's not count him out just because the evaluation bar is slightly in Magnus' favor. The material imbalance now is knight and one pawn for rook. And let's not forget about those opposite colored bishops. So black can use the dark squares to his advantage. White is going to try to operate on the light squares, but to what end? What light squares are actually valuable? That's an essential question. So I like the way that Fedoseev is handling this. I think this gives him the best practical chances.
We're far from out of it. It's they're just imbalanced, as we would say, Tanya. The players have no idea who's better. And Fedoseev, I could see him, especially if he gets his pawn 2 squares further down the board, him working things in his favor. Do you think Magnus needs to be careful as well?
I'm materialistic. I love the fact that there's an extra exchange for white, and I agree that black's got compensation, but that knight on c6, the bishop on b5, there are these tactical ideas of either knight takes a5 or knight takes b4 next. Watch out, the knight on d7 is still hanging. It's a threat that you need to take care of. To me, it just feels that Fedoseev needs to be on the defense. He needs to keep the activity going. He has to play active to defend this position. The plan that you're pointing out of the c-pawn moving forward, the bishop on b5 right now takes control of that. So it still requires a bit of prep. Right now, I'm expecting Fedoseev to move his knight. He does it. Knight to b6. The eval bar hits it. And Magnus just continues to keep opening up the position. The lines for the bishops and the lines for the rooks and the diagonals for the bishops.
And now it's busted for black. This is a problem. Once this rook gets in the game, and you can see that Fedoseev is in trouble, I think it's important to analyze what he could have done instead. And it was just a one-move play from Fedoseev that would have kept him in the game rather than opening the rooks up. Bishop to g3. Just trying to blockade this d-pawn so the rooks don't have open files. When you're down material, especially when your opponent has 2 rooks, just one for yourself, you need to keep those rooks contained. So this would have been a good choice. Instead, what we see in the game, the rooks are loose, they are free to roam about the board, and now one of them is off the board, and that's bad news for black because that a5 pawn is tender, the d file remains open. Black can't keep everything under his control, and Magnus Carlsen for sure is winning this first game, David.
100%. It's all about that target on a5, pretty much indefensible in the kind of short term. And this white a pawn, not only does it promote on a light square guided by your bishop, but it's pretty much unstoppable. You have no rooks left as black. Yeah, knights are terrible at stopping these corner pawns, these rook pawns. So once the white knight retreats, takes this pawn, it's a matter of time before Fedoseev has to resign. We saw him sit back, exhale a moment ago. He knows it's over. The white rook doesn't look impressive now, but it will soon join the fun. And I think we'll see a very simple plan. Black's counterplay, far too slow. And Magnus, he's going pawn hunting. He's going to hunt down the full point in this game soon, closing out the victory. Again, just in the space of 1 or 2 moves, this is how strong the top players are. They punish you, one small imperceptible slip, and here we go. Knight takes pawn, inevitable. It's just a straightforward plan. Magnus about to bank it. We think, Tanya, shall we go to the other game where there's still action on the board?
Definitely. I just want to say this is how strong Magnus Carlsen can be, especially in these positions. I mean, we were talking about an equal opening, an outcome where white had nothing. And then just out of nowhere, Magnus comes up with a winning position. How did it happen? When did it all go so wrong? It's just unbelievable how he makes these things just appear on the board and makes chess look so easy. It's insane. He's playing against one of the best players in the world. He has a completely winning position out of a completely equal opening. Magnus Carlsen just doing Magnus things. I think it's a good time, David, to jump over to our other board. It's an exciting middle game. Robert, what do you make of what we're seeing on the left side of our screen between Denis Lazovic and Jose Martinez?
It's definitely heating up on the left-hand side board because there are open diagonals for both players. Usually, open space, it is good for the player with the pair of bishops as Jose Martinez. His camera's on the bottom left-hand side of our screen. But Denis Lazovic, he just doesn't back down against anyone. It's super impressive. The game between Magnus and Fedoseev is officially over. No surprises there. Magnus takes game 1,